A lot of people associate a character's death with them simply just leaving the fold. A lot of the times, a character's death is more than just them disappearing from the plot of the story or simply having their story come to an abrupt and tragic end. Sometimes it can symbolize something else or create an entirely new story based off of their death. Some deaths can have chain reactions, vast consequences, things that would shake the earth underneath everyone's feet. But at the same time, some deaths can be catalysts and can be used as such to propel a character forward, if not propel a story forward. Although not many people use deaths in this regard, deaths are often used in many regards to boost a story or propel it, or to evoke emotion and pull at the heartstrings, which is a very manipulative and smart tactic to make a reader cry. Hi, my name's Night Owl, and this is how to write a story. Now, character deaths and, well, deaths in general are fairly common throughout stories. I mean, have you ever played D&D, any video game? Heck, have you ever read any book that involves horror, mystique, and mystery? There's a lot of the word death, die, and a lot of other things that I don't think I can say, or else the TOS censor that YouTube might silence me because of my freedom of speech. But that's a joke for another day. Anyway, my own bullshitting aside, what is a character's death? Well, it's more than just removing them from the fray or throwing them away, but rather, it's the continuation of another character's story from that character's death. It sounds a little confusing, but allow me to explain. Now, say we have a guy named Lord Marand, and then we have another guy named Lord Keeg. Now, these two are best friends, thick of thick and thick of thieves they are. But at the same time, nothing lasts forever. And of course, one of them bites the dust. Well, now it's time to continue the story of the other guy. When he figures out what happened to him, what will he do? How will he handle it? What will the stakes be? Okay, yeah, there's a lot of stuff here that you could probably deal with, but let's try and actually take a nicer and much more easy to understand and follow example. And yeah, I hope you guys are not afraid or angry at spoilers for this one. The friendly, good old Markiplier lookalike, Colonel Mays Hughes. And yeah, unfortunately enough for him, he'll be our relatively somber example. Throughout the story of FMA, we learn a lot about Mays Hughes. We learn that he's a family man with a wife and a loving daughter, and he tries to balance his military career with his family life at the same time. Although we don't exactly see him in the fray too often, he's grown to become a very lovable and enjoyable character. Although a lot of people who did watch the original FMA already know what may happen to him, those that just got into watching FMA through Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood would not. And although Hughes was a loyal soldier and a very smart man, he was also a really clever investigator. So clever, in fact, that, well, it ended up catching up to him. Being a bit too smart for his own good, Hughes discovered the grand conspiracy that was about to befall his country. And of course, the victims not only being his family, but his friends, co-workers, and of course, his comrades. Naturally, he would try to get this information out there, but him being smart and all, it did backfire completely. Although the clever man that he was, a lot of things would catch up to bite him. And nipping at his heels, you see this sort of feeling, this intense anxiety rush you and rush him. Will he deliver the message? What will he do? How will he handle it? So many questions swimming in your mind at once. But the biggest one is, will he survive? As smart, clever, and inquisitive as he was, the one thing that caught him in the end and got him killed was his own heart.
What the hell are you?
So, what can we take away from this? Yeah, that's a bit of a very weird note to leave this whole entire summary and synopsis of his death on. But what you can take away from Colonel Mayhew's death is, well, a lot of things. First off, it is a great way to abruptly end a character's story, and it does it in a somber and very heart-wrenching punch that not only complements the story that they're telling well, but it also gives his death a sort of meaning, because not only does his death propel so many stories and character arcs, but it also leads to a lot of characters developing because of it. This is a beautiful way of using a character's death as a catalyst. And yeah, throughout this video you're going to hear me use that word a lot. Now, a catalyst in my own definition is a character, objective, story beat, or something type of an event that creates a sort of effect, or, in other words, creates a sort of reaction. Now, normally, these reactions can be small, big, or groundbreaking, and some of them can be very light, or just very action-packed. Now, I'm going to try and be very brief on the details so I don't have this video stay for hours upon hours on end and you lose focus and attention, but to make a long story short, a catalyst is a big, impactful thing that hits the story like a gut punch. And yes, you can use characters as a catalyst to propel another character or another plot. It can become a very major or powerful thing that affects your story, if not influences your characters to make major, rash, or sometimes irresponsible decisions. And yes, they can sometimes bite them in the butt. Not saying they always have to, but they sometimes can. In the case of Mayhew, it not only propels multiple story beats and character plot points, but it propels one character in particular to focus very well on his death, that being his best friend, Colonel Roy Mustang. Not only does he focus very well on Mayhew's death, he not only brings it up in a lot of the conversation when it comes to which homunculi did him in, because yes, a homunculus did kill him. He also uses it as a means to investigate what's going on in Central City. And not only is it used effectively, it's used efficiently. And man, does it really hit when he finally gets revenge on at least one of those little demons. Now comes the next part of how to write a story when it comes to death, and it's a part that I don't exactly enjoy teaching. I believe a lot of stories should at the very least leave you inspired, leave you determined, leave you feeling stronger in some sort of way. But there are some stories where they end so upsettingly that it's almost depressing. It leaves you wanting to try and fix it, leaves you trying to solve the problem that's at the core aspect of it all. But sometimes you don't exactly get it. And where else to look than cyberpunk? There are a lot of characters and stories within cyberpunk that are very easy to take note of. I mean, heck, it's built quite a community, quite a lot of stories, and lots of inspirations from movies like Blade Runner and so on and so forth. But in the spirit of, well, what is the name of cyberpunk, we're going to be taking a look at Mike Pondsmith's universe of cyberpunk, which means we're taking a look at the year 2077, which, God, is that year painful. Now, you're probably wondering, so a lot of the deaths in cyberpunk are obviously catalysts. Well, not necessarily. You see, death isn't always a character biting the dust or going out in a blaze of glory. Sometimes, death is more subtle. It creeps more into your bone. You don't go out in a blaze of glory, in a blaze of gun smoke, in a tirade of the ages. Sometimes you go out more softly, more quietly. Gently, you go out into that night. Then, death grips you, ripping you down into its cold, icy depths. Your breath shakes and catches, as you feel your mouth dry and your throat become drier. You feel the ice-cold piercings of their daggers into your heart as they run their fingers up your spine and grip you, telling you that they are not after your life. It's not quite worth it. But they will rob you of everything that your life had meaning with. And you watch in horror, frozen in shock, as time goes by. And everything that your life held meaning with, everything it clung to, gently fades away. Yeah, sorry, that went a little philosophical. My bad. What I meant to say is, dying isn't always the way you can achieve death in a story. Sometimes a character's death is more than just them biting the bullet and leaving their mortal husk behind. Sometimes, when a character finally does die, it's not physically. Sometimes it's mentally and spiritually. Let's take an instance out of V's book from the brand new Phantom Liberty DLC. You see, V was a legendary mercenary, depending on how you played him. He could be the guy or gal that didn't exactly take no nonsense from anybody, that beat the brakes off them or outsmarted them, that ran through Netrunner's ice like it was nothing but an ice skating rink, or better yet, swam through waves and waves of bodies like it was nothing but an average day in Florida. But sometimes, though, even characters that are that unstoppable, that unbeatable, sometimes there's a motive behind everything they do, and, well, sure enough, we're trying to get a biochip out of our head. And sadly enough, we do succeed in Phantom Liberty. We get it out, technically. We wipe the entire Engram's data, which, of course, takes away Johnny Silverhand in the process. Yet, it does something else as well. Something much worse, something more brutal and grotesque. It gets rid of V's ability to use cybernetics. Any sort of cyber enhancement, anything, from muscle boosters to straight up robotic arms. V can't use this stuff anymore. In fact, he's unable to. And it's brutal, to say the least. Now, normally, V would probably be a-okay with this. I mean, picture it. He's in NUSA territory. He can have a new life in Langley, thanks to Reed just giving him the recommendation. But unfortunately for them, V can't go back to it. They want to go back to Night City, back to their home, and maybe see if they can get some chrome back in their system. But after a while, it becomes obvious what's wrong with V. Everything's changed. It's been 2 years since V just fell off the map and disappeared from Night City. 2 years since V just suddenly disappeared and never returned. 2 years since his friends ever heard from him, since his friends ever saw her, since his friends ever even knew they existed. And a lot has changed. Victor's clinic is turning into a megacorp. River is no longer River the PI, but rather broken. Judy got married and is living in Minnesota somewhere. Or is it Wyoming? And Panam, well, she's forgotten V entirely. After going through her state of grieving, she doesn't want to try and latch onto him now. Then there's Carrie, who's a megastar, a mega pop icon. And then there's Misty, who left it all behind in Night City, just like Judy. Only this time, she never looked back. But what happened to V? What happened to his life? What happened to them? When they try to get their augments back, they can't. Victor can't. It's impossible, he says. When they try to defend themselves, use their street smarts, they can't. It backfires. He gets punched down some flight of stairs. It's over for him. Then there's nothing. V can't even do all the cool stuff you can do. V can't jump around, can't break people's brains with their cyber deck, can't slice people in half with the arm blades that they've installed and shipped in. They can't do anything that they used to do. And that only means one thing. The V of the afterlife. The V that survived Arasaka's attempt at killing him and Dexter Deshawn's bullet. The V that escaped Konpeki Plaza after that botched heist? The V that did all of these things and had Johnny fucking Silverhand in her brain is gone. Now we're left with Dexter Deshawn's question, and only one answer. How do you want to live, V? Quiet life? Or do you want to go out in a blaze of glory? And sadly, in a pursuit to save our own lives, we've lost our old one. We lost our old body, our old selves. We lost us. So now we're stuck with a quiet life in Night City, unable to bounce back, unable to do what we used to do. And sadly, even worse, unable to be the legend of the afterlife that was V. So what exactly can we take away from that? That whole synopsis and, honestly, philosophizing. Truthfully, there's a lot you can take away. A character is only themselves when they can be themselves. When they have to drop their facade or they lose everything that made them them, are they truly alive? Are they truly breathing, thinking, being themselves? Or are they something else? Something less? An inferior copy, a bootleg of what they used to be? Honestly, there's a simple answer to that. No. Because sure, you can put a bullet to a character's head or slice them in pieces, blow them up, but at least they died in that way. For a character's death, there's millions of ways you can finish them off. You don't necessarily have to end their story abruptly with a bullet or a stab. But sometimes you can peer past the physical aspects of what makes them and just tear out what made them them. To die on your deathbed is one thing, but to die but lose your morals in the process, that's a whole different creature. And a sad one at that. Truthfully, it's a painful way to go. And honestly, it sucks. However, with V, he went out not only losing their morals, but sacrificing everything in the process, but getting absolutely nothing. Sure, he got to live, but is that really your character living? Or is that them just slowly dying, bit by bit, internally? That's for you to decide, and for you to write. You're the writer, after all. Now it's time to see how your theme lines up with their end. Yeah. Sorry about that. I needed a minute to compose myself from the most depressing fucking thing I have said in the past month. So, pardon me for some of the vulgar additives. Okay. Feeling a bit better now. Let's go ahead and cover a character that actually doesn't leave me depressed and feeling hollow thanks to the cyberpunk genre doing just that as its job. One that doesn't really die in the sense of abrupt character ending or suddenly just depressing as all get out. We instead might cover one of the more sophisticated variety. A character that dwells not in the sci-fi futuristic dystopia that is a cyberpunk, but more in the fantasy realm of medieval literature. More in the fantasy realm of medieval storytelling, and more in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons. If you're probably guessing who I'm going to mention, then, well, I'm all ears. But if you don't know, you will now know. For we will talk about Gale of Waterdeep. Isn't that right, Gale?
Hello, I am Gale of Waterdeep.
What the fuck? Okay, hold on a second. I hired Gale of Waterdeep. Hold on a second, wait a minute. You're not Gale. Who the hell are you?
I, my friend, am Gale of Waterdeep. I don't know what you are talking about, but there is much merriment to be had, and...
Okay, no, I'm sorry. I'm not falling for that one. I don't care if you're a simulacrum, a fake Gale, or the real one. You are definitely not Gale. So, I'm gonna have to bury this motherfucker somewhere. Give me like 2 shakes. Sorry about that. Anyway, I bring up Gale of Waterdeep mainly because of one major thing about him. His character arc can come to either an abrupt end by your hand or an enemy's, or he can have a full cycle character arc in 3 very magnificent ways. One of them gets you an early game over, and the other one gets you something more, gets you something beautiful, gets you something that goes completely full circle. And I'm not going to deny it, I think it's beautiful how some of the characters are written, as some are written much better than others. But for this instance, Gale, I believe, is probably the best instance of the greatest written characters you can imagine or see. So let's explain why his death in these 2 cases are one of the more heroic sacrificing deaths, because this is what it is, heroic sacrifice. So, we already know how you can die in V's own example, with being different than you were originally, losing yourself completely to something else. But in this, you give up those things in order for a better and brighter future and tomorrow. What I'm trying to get at here is, with Gale's entire story arc, he wants to redeem himself in the eyes of Mystra. Yes, a god who he had a one-night stand and love affair with. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, that's a bit like, holy shit, how do you bang a god? But then again, he did get kicked out of her bedchamber soon after and started simping over her before he got something stuck in his chest that was essentially a bomb. Oh yeah, I'm not kidding, that's a fucking bomb in his chest. So, I guess nobody ring him? That'd probably be a bad idea. Anyways, joke aside, terrible joke aside, the main thing about Gale and his character arc is the fact that he tries his damnedest to redeem himself. And you have some options to try and help him do so, through convincing dialogue or uplifting encouragement, or simply being there in his time of need and perhaps being more to him than just a friend. You can convince him of other methods to try and save himself. And thankfully, there's 2 methods you can take, but we're not going to go into the negative, sad method, we're going to go into the important method, the sacrificing methods. Gale's story ends in one of 2 ways. One is a heroic tragedy, and the other is, well, understanding. Finally, being at calm and one's peace with themselves. And what is that understanding? Simple. Let's go over the first one first. Gale's big sacrifice. You see, Gale has 2 opportunities to blow himself up. Yes, 2 major opportunities to complete his job and blow himself up. With the first one being all the way back in Act 2, and the second one, which I think is the least obvious, being in Act 3. Say you have Gale with you on this sort of quest. In Act 3, you can convince Gale to blow himself up in order to stop the Elder Brain, also known as the Absolute. Upon blowing himself up, he will kill the Elder Brain, stop the entire Mind Flayer conquest, and essentially save all of Baldur's Gate, while also enshrining, and should I say destroying, the crown of Karsus, the very Karsus who killed a god, might I add. So I'm not going to go into that backstory because that's too much. But I will say, they did the deed. Fun. Not only would his death bring the end of the Elder Brain, it would also save millions of people that live and reside in Baldur's Gate. Not only disrupting the Mind Flayers for a critical few minutes, maybe even hours, but allowing others to not only kill them, but help them break free of the cursed bindings that is the Elder Brain's influence. Better to be breaking free of those chains than to be shackled to them, I say. Then there is the aftermath of his decision. Gale of Waterdeep has perished, but in the eyes of Mystra he has been redeemed, even if it is tears down her eyes. But I don't think she really cares somewhat. They are a god after all, so And that is but one end to Gale's story. The other end, should you play your cards right and actually get him alive, while also not being a Mind Flayer yourself if you're lucky, which is rare, you can convince Gale to leave the Crown of Karsus alone, after beating the Elder Brain, might I add. Upon defeating them, Gale will lament that he could take the crown of Karsus, that he could become the most powerful mage to ever exist, with his ability to use the weave and understand it, and his natural innate power and prowess with it. He could rival the gods, he could rival Mystra, out of an act of revenge and maybe a little bit of sour pettiness. But he chooses not to. That's right. He gives it all up for essentially, I'd say, anonymous or rather unknown reasons. But some would say that you made quite the impression on him, that you taught him the folly of Karsus to himself once more and enlightened him on that folly. That even if he does take the crown, he'll be no better than Karsus at keeping it. And worst yet, he'll be no better than Karsus at achieving success, at his goal. It takes a lot of courage and a lot more honesty to understand that and, well, to eventually relinquish the crown's power back to Mystra. That, or you could be Gale's origin character and relinquish it yourself in that regard, understanding Karsus' folly and knowing full well what this could mean if Gale decided to follow through on his original plans. Again, I feel that is pretty artistic to think about. Gale learns about Karsus, wants to learn more from him to potentially influence or better yet persuade Mystra to love him more. But then he realizes Karsus might have been a similar love-struck or power-hungry fool. And thus, he gives it up, learning his lesson, and thus sacrificing what could be a moment to rise beyond greatness, a moment to enshrine yourself in legend. And he understands it. This, in turn, is decently a heroic sacrifice. Okay, technically, it's not a heroic sacrifice, the other one was, but it still technically fits the whole, I'm giving this up so I can have a better life in the future. And that's a lot to give up. Trust me, it's a lot. So, what exactly can we learn from Gale's story? Aside from him giving up so much and getting so little. Well, two things. One, a character death doesn't always have to be depressing. Thanks, Cyberpunk. Very much ruined my day. Ugh. But they can be more inspirational and influential in their own unique ways. The fact that Gale could give himself up in these regards shows how selfless he really thinks of himself, or rather, how selfless he believes he is. And at the same time, the fact that Mystra, God, being very petty about that sort of thing, shows how different she is to him. Sure, Gale could sacrifice his life for little to nothing in return, with promises of being reincarnated, but he doesn't really care. He wants to be redeemed in her eyes. He wants to seek her approval and apologize on equal and rather neutral grounds. It's a sad truth about it, though. And yet, he gives up so much to atone, to appease, to apologize, and receives very little in return. Sometimes that's a character's sacrifice to make. And yeah, it doesn't always leave them feeling the best, doesn't always have the most sweet of endings, but it can sometimes be a little bittersweet. It's like ginger, with a little splash of honey. But hey, what do I know? It's not like I'm the guy behind the pen and paper writing their story. It's not like I'm the gentleman leading your characters into the greatest charge of their lives. It's not like I am the director of your final battle, your greatest conquest. It is not like I am the writer, the soon-to-be narrative star, to write your next tale. For I am merely the narrator, merely the orator of how to better perform, how to better tell, how to better regale, and how to write your story. Take care, and hopefully you learned a thing or two. And that is over. But before you go, might I ask you to do me a few favors? If you want to support this channel, you can like and subscribe, obviously, or just comment so I can talk to you. Get your insight and opinion on how this video laid out and how good it was for you to experience and learn from this video. If you also have your own insights and, I'd say, outlooks on how I got these characters written down for each of them and their deaths, then please, go right ahead. Don't feel afraid to start typing it up and communicating with me, because I always communicate back, and I always reply back to all my viewers who do comment, because I enjoy talking to you guys. But if you want to support this channel more than just with likes, subscribes, and comments, then you can also take a look at my Patreon, which is also down in the description below. Or if you really, really want to support me, you can take a look at some of my actual works, more than likely being posted on Amazon Kindle by the 21st of October, or at the very least, near the 21st of October, where you can take a look at my brand new book or short story, Hell and Hemlock. With that being said though, I do hope you enjoyed this video. I do hope you can take something away from it, and I do hope you can write amazing and greater characters with all of my videos now here. And with this entire How to Write a Character series completed, I can now move on to something better, or at the very least something more. Probably going to be writing tips on how to write better stories or writer genres, or maybe better, I could teach you how to write your world. Yeah, that'd be fun. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. And above all else, have one heck of a time writing and have one heck of a day doing your thing.